As we discussed before, that arrays were objects, and so the equality operator and the assignment operator behave and misbehave in the same way with arrays as they do with any kind of object we saw before discussing arrays. To understand how this applies to arrays, you need to know a little bit about how arrays are stored in the computer's main memory. The important point for this discussion is that when you declare an array, then the entire array contents, that is the contents of all of the index variables, are stored together in one possibly large section of memory, and the address of this memory is assigned to the label of this array, which is the identifier of the array. In this way, the location of the entire array contents can be specified by one memory address that is the reference of the array. Then we can say that the variable or the identifier for the array object does not contain the actual index variables of the array. In fact, it contains the memory address of the object of the array, which we call it a reference. In this case, the equality operator does not test whether two arrays are equal element by element. It tests whether two arrays are stored in same place in memory. Also, the assignment operator. It does not copy two arrays element by element. However, it copies the addresses of these arrays. Consider the following code. We are declaring three arrays, all of them of type integer. The first array A initialized with the constant 1 and 2. The second array B initialized also with the constants 1 and 2. And the third array C initialized with the constant 3 and 4. Notice that the arrays A and B, element by element, they are equal. So we say that the array A is equal to the array B. Let us have a look into the memory, how these arrays are stored. Since arrays are objects, so that means when the system creates the array, it creates the index variables in a place different than the place of the identifier A. Let's take a look into this example as a sample of a memory when we defined these three arrays. When we declare the array A with the constants 1 and 2 as index variables, these index variables assume that were saved at address 5500. So the first index variable at address 5500, it depends on the size of the integer. If the size of the integer is 4 bytes, then the next address for the second element will be 5504. And assume that the array B is also saved in the memory in a different place at address 7500. And for the third array, assume that it is saved at address 900. Anytime an array is created, it is placed in the memory and it will have an address. Now what A is holding? A is holding the address of the array. So if 1 and 2 as an object saved at address 5500, then A will hold this address, and notice now A has a copy of the reference, the address of the indexed variables. And B also has the address of array B, and C also has the address of array C. Now when you try to compare array A and B, in fact, we are not comparing the index variables A and B one by one. Notice now, when you compare the array elements, element by element, they are equal. So we say that A and B arrays are equal. However, if you use the equality operator on the names of the arrays, in fact, you are not comparing the elements of the array one by one. You are comparing the values inside A and B. What do we have in A? We have the address of the array A, 5500. And what do we have in B? We have the address of the array B, which is 7500. And in fact, these two arrays are stored in different places in the memory. So therefore, definitely they are not equal. Although the elements by elements, they are equal, but the equality does not check the array elements one by one. It checks the addresses, and therefore what will be printed on the output screen? It will say that they point to different arrays. This is regarding the equality operator. Now regarding the assignment operator, you know that we use assignment operator for copying whatever on the right hand side to the variable on the left hand side. Now when you write B equal to C, in fact you are not copying the elements of C into B. So maybe you expect that after this assignment statement is executed, that B will be equal to 3 and 4. On the contrary, the address of C will be saved into B. So what is inside C? Inside C we have 900, and this value will be copied into B, and this is the picture what we are going to have when C is copied into B. So the old value of B will be replaced by the new value, which is C. And now notice that B and C have the same addresses. That means B and C pointing to the same array, which is 3 and 4. Now what about B? Now CB, which is this array, is not referenced by any variable. So A is pointing to the array, the first one, B is pointing to the third array, and C is pointing to the third array as well. So B does not have any reference by any variable. Therefore, when the system comes to the memory and finds an array or any object that is not referenced by any variable, it will automatically remove it from the memory. So how to compare two arrays that are equal element by element, and also how to copy an array into another array element by element. To do that, you have to write code by yourself. For example, if you want to test whether two arrays are equal or not, then you have to create a for loop, test the two arrays element by element. If there is a difference in at least one of the index variables, then you say that they are not equal. Also, how to copy an array into another array, element by element, the same way that you have to go over the elements one by one and copy them into the other array. Let me show you how we can do this. This is an example showing you both how to copy an array into another array, also showing you how to test two arrays are equal or not by testing every individual elements of the two arrays one by one. Let us first see how we can copy one array into another array. First, we have to prepare the arrays. So in this line, we are creating an array of integer of size 3, and we have a method that will initialize array by putting data into the array A. Notice A is passed as a parameter. Now what does this method do? In fact, it sets every index variable by its index. So it traverses over the array elements. If A is passed as an argument to the method, and it will have different name, which is called array inside the method. And notice we are having a for loop that assigns the index to its corresponding index variable. So when we return back to the main method, what we will see inside A is that in every individual element, we will have its index. So how to copy one array into another one? So if we have another array, which is called B, defined as an integer, now we cannot simply say that integer array B equal to A and assume that A will be copied into B. You have to write a method that will create a new array and will put all the values of A inside this array and will return it as a return value and save it into B. So notice here we are going to pass the source array as an input parameter, and the destination array will be created inside the method, and its address will be returned and saved into B. So B will be the destination array and A will be the source array. Let us see the code for the method copy and how it copies all elements of A and returns an array. Its address will be returned and saved into B. If you want to copy an array into another array, then the original array will be the source array and the copied array will be the destination. So we say that we are copying a source array into a destination array. This is how now an array A, which is the source array, copied into B as the destination. See how we are defining the array, integer, array, and B and equal. So that means the return value of the method will be assigned to B. Let us see the implementation of the method copy. This is the implementation of the method copy. Notice that the input parameter is an array and the return value is also an array. So this is why when you supply A as a source array, this source array will be represented as an array inside the method. Now the method inside will create an array called temp that has the same size as the source array. And then we'll use a for loop by copying every element of the source array into this array. And at the end, it will retain the address of this array as a return value from the method. Once this return value is returned from the method, it will be copied into B and B will be the destination array. So this is how you copy an array into another array. You cannot just simply use the assignment operator. You have to copy every element of the source array into the destination array. Next, how to test that two arrays are equal or not. In other words, how to test that both have the same indexed variables or elements. Remember that using the equal operator, it does not check individual elements of the arrays one by one. In fact, it tests the addresses of those arrays. And most probably, these addresses are different. Why? Because whenever we create an array, it is created in a place in a memory, and when we create another array, it will be created in a different place in the memory, even if they have the same constants inside. So therefore, we need to write a method that will accept the two arrays as input parameters and compare the elements one by one. We have called this method equals. So in here, in this if statement, we are testing the addresses of the two arrays. We are not testing the elements of the two arrays. But in this method, we are supplying the two arrays as input parameters. And inside this method, it's going to test the two arrays element by element. If there is at least one difference in an index variable in one of the elements, then it will return false and say that they are not equal. So the returning of this method is a Boolean variable, whether the two arrays are equal or not. Let us see the implementation of this array. This is the implementation of the equals method. It returns a Boolean value, true or false. True if the two arrays supplied as input parameters are equal element by element. Otherwise, it returns false. The method uses a local Boolean variable called elements match. If this elements match variable is equal to true, it means that the two arrays elements match. And if elements match is equal to false, it means that the two arrays are not equal. Initially, we assume that every element of both arrays match. The first test is we test for the length. Definitely, if these two arrays do not have the same length, then they are not equal. So if both lengths for A and B do not agree, then elements match variable will be equal to false. And notice that inside the method, we have if and big else. So if this if statement is true, then it will skip else and it will return false that the two arrays do not match because they don't have the same length. However, if they agree on the length, then we will go inside else. Inside else, there is a for loop that will check element by element of any of these arrays. And we are picking A because both have the same length. Notice when the for loop will terminate. It will terminate when we reach the end of the array or when we find no match. So notice inside, if there is no match, if one of the index variables of array A does not equal to the corresponding index variable B, then we set elements match to false, and in the next iteration, the value of elements match will be false, and this condition will be false because we have and we will exit the loop, and when we exit the loop, the return value will be false. However, if all elements agree in both arrays, so this if statement is never true. So in this case, elements match will never change and it will be true, and when we exit the for loop, elements match will keep its value true, and this true will be returned as a return value. So when the method returns a true, that means A and B are equal, and when it returns false, that means they are not equal.